Yeah, this is really exciting, and I will admit to being slightly more radicalized than I normally am. And I tend to be a little bit over the top when it comes to Agile, Lean, or really any of the mechanisms for arranging work. I found over time that all of them have value. But in the last couple of days, I have been at Agile Philly and sat through that and actually presented there, and Agile DC and presented there, and so therefore if I'm a little bit over radicalized today, you can blame it on all of those crazy people in Philadelphia and Washington DC talking about Agile for the last couple of days. So what is the role of the classic project manager in a postmodern, post-waterfall kind of world? You know, does the project manager role change in an Agile project? Is it the same, you know, or is it there really just to be, you know, be a sort of a surrogate Scrum Master? And I think the answer to any of those questions is, unfortunately, no. I mean, no, it's not a surrogate Scrum Master. No, it doesn't change, but is it really involved is, I think, more a question. So in a really simple world, we'd have a great simple answer for this. But we don't live in a simple world. I mean, the slide that you're looking at right now, even a medium-sized or even large IT, of course, but a medium-sized IT organization exists in a really complicated environment, whether it's processes and trying to understand whether or not we have the right processes. And by the way, nothing in Agile, nothing in Lean says you don't have processes. But there are technical processes, there are technical standards that you might have to deal with. You might decide to use Scrum as your project control, project management kind of construction. You might try to do test-driven development. All of these are processes. And then there's governance. And regardless of where we are in the world, governance structures control how work is done. And they're based on a lot of those process assumptions, and a lot of governance makes the assumption that process yields better results. And it's interesting. I like to think that's true. I might suggest that there is some data that suggests that, but we're all struggling to understand whether or not there's truly data that suggests that the processes that any organization, any person is using actually gets work done more correctly, or maybe even more efficiently. So governance structures make that, and there's tons of governance structures, whether it's policies and libraries and other kinds of things. SOX is a process governance kind of construct. And then there is work oversight. So we struggle with ensuring that we're doing the right work, oversight, that we're doing it correctly, governance, and that we're using the right processes, and that we're doing all of these things together so that we can attain a result. Realistically, why are we doing this? We're doing this because we believe that the work that we're doing has value, and that by following all of these constructs that will yield more value. And if we don't have that belief, then we're probably struggling against any of this. So classic projects in these environments focus on the control side, I'd suggest, and that with PMOs acting as that control anchor in many organizations. Organizations without PMOs probably leverage, things like, a standalone project manager or program manager. Wrong arrow. Okay, so, the classic sort of project structure. And again, many organizations, this still makes sense because of the culture. and even though I'm radicalized with all this Agile energy in me these days, I'm still a believer that where the culture can't deal with Agile, you need all of this different, sort of this PMO kind of structure. A friend of mine and I, Murali Chematuri, and myself wrote a book on mastering software project management. So it's not that I don't believe in this stuff. It's just I don't believe that it fits everywhere these days. But the common roles of a PMO: measurement, tracking, facilitation, facilitating communication, all of these kinds of things, they provide oversight in control. The role of the project manager is to ride herd and get things done. Now, we look at these, and we look at these common kinds of roles: scheduling, assignment, reporting, tracking, issues and risk management, cajoling, all of those kinds of things. But in reality, when we pass and go over and start moving down the Agile continuum, we have to start asking ourselves the question, as a project manager, what do we really control? Are we truly a project manager? Are we a project administrator? Do we lead? Do we manage? Do we administer? I would suggest that we, even though we don't talk as much as we used to about the iron triangle, the combination of scope, cost, schedule, and quality, those kinds of things are still truly important. All project managers would have to ask themselves, though, is whether or not they truly control these kinds of things, or are they just reporting on them. And in many organizations, that even though they're hierarchical in structure, they have this command and control mentality, most project managers are more administrative in terms of these kinds of things. They really have lost a thread that I think is important in a lot of organizations, and that is that a manager and a leader aren't necessarily the same thing, and that leadership is truly, leadership, coaching, those sorts of things are truly critical to actually getting work done. Now, when we think about all of this kinds of things, and I wake up in the middle of the night and it drives my wife crazy and start to mumble about this stuff and write things down. And of course, it's mumbling is not because I'm mad, but it's a wrestling with this whole concept of responsibility without influence. And responsibility also means that we tend to be held accountable for things. And when I say without influence, it's really truly without the power to use our prestige, wealth, ability, whatever, our position to actually make things happen. Now, I'll be honest with you. Notice that I didn't say responsibility without influence. I didn't say responsibility without authority. I think responsibility without true influence is a recipe for stress. And stress is that thing that causes us to do all sorts of crazy things. I would suggest that this type of stress on projects is a contributing reason to why we started to see people embrace Agile and help create the Agile Manifesto. So I'm not going to actually go through and really hit this Agile Manifesto hard. I'm sure all of you have gone out to the agilemanifesto.org. You've read the Agile Manifesto. Some of you might have even tattooed the Agile Manifesto on your arm. But in reality, this construct really is all about